The first alarm didn't come from Benin, it came from Ghana. Witnesses saw soldiers storm President Patrice Talon's residence, gunfire tearing through the night. Minutes later, uniformed men appeared on state TV declaring, "Talon has been removed. The military now leads Benin." But here's the twist. This coup was built on a lie. And in the next few minutes, we'll show you how an entire takeover collapsed before it even began. Everything you think you know about this coup is wrong. Let's break it down.
His house, and we saw also some military who spoke on a television in Benin, Cotonou, the capital, and they said that the president was ousted and replaced by a military with the establishment of a Salvation Organization Committee.
For decades, Benin has been regarded as one of West Africa's quiet success stories, a nation defined by stability, predictable elections, and a calm political climate, even as neighboring states were shaken by repeated military coups. While Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger slipped into cycles of upheaval, Benin maintained a steady democratic rhythm. The idea of a coup unfolding in Cotonou seemed almost unthinkable. That illusion collapsed on a recent Sunday morning. Just after dawn, viewers tuning in to the national broadcaster expected routine programming. Instead, they were confronted by armed soldiers occupying the studio and announcing the dissolution of the government. In the same breath, they declared that President Patrice Talon had been ousted. It was Benin's first attempted coup in over half a century, swift, coordinated, and profoundly unsettling. Yet the real shock was not the coup itself, but the extraordinary speed and intensity of the response. Within hours, foreign forces crossed into Benin. Fighter jets asserted control over the country's airspace. The region, already on edge from years of instability, found itself entering a new and dangerous phase, one in which coups no longer unfold quietly, but trigger immediate regional confrontation. For analysts, the events of that Sunday marked the abrupt end of Benin's long-held status as West Africa's exception. For ordinary citizens, it marked the moment when the quiet confidence in their country's democratic resilience was shattered. The first signs of the upheaval came not from the streets of Cotonou, but from television screens across the nation. Where viewers expected familiar anchors and political debates, they instead saw soldiers standing stiffly in a studio that appeared hastily seized. A uniformed officer stepped forward, his voice steady but his expression strained, and read a stark declaration. The government had been dissolved and all state institutions suspended. What follows now is a question gripping the entire region. What exactly is happening in Benin, and what comes next? President Patrice Talon had been removed, the statement said, and a new military committee for refoundation was now in charge. It was not a rumor, not an anonymous leak. It was a coup announcement delivered calmly and confidently into millions of homes. For a population unaccustomed to sudden political upheaval, the moment felt surreal, as though a stable nation had been pulled abruptly into an alternate reality. Yet even in its shock, the broadcast did not follow the familiar choreography of a West African coup. The studio was intact, the lighting was steady, the microphones functioned perfectly. The soldiers knew. The unusually calm tone of Benin's televised coup announcement, analysts now say, had a simple explanation. The mutineers were not celebrating success, they were stalling for time. Their strategy relied on a single hope, that once their message went public, other military units would rally behind them. They expected northern troops, frustrated with security issues, to seize the moment, political rivals of the government to quietly endorse the uprising, and confusion to paralyze the capital long enough for momentum to build. None of those expectations materialized. Instead, the response from loyalist forces was swift and coordinated. Senior commanders reaffirmed their allegiance to President Patrice Talon within minutes. Elite units were deployed toward the national broadcaster. Communication networks were secured, and Talon himself appeared on a protected channel, declaring that the situation was totally under control. Far from a reassuring slogan, the statement was a coded signal to the entire military that the chain of command remained intact. Outside the broadcaster's compound, armored vehicles formed a silent perimeter. Inside, technicians deliberately slowed the broadcast feed in an attempt to undermine the mutineers' message. Only then did the coup leaders grasp the truth. They were isolated. No reinforcements were coming. No political faction had stepped forward. No sympathetic units were mobilizing. They had seized the microphone, but not the country. Panic spread among the plotters. Abandoning the broadcaster, they retreated to a military camp they believed they could defend. A move that instantly expanded the crisis. What began as a contained mutiny now threatened to escalate into a fortified standoff. The the kind capable of dragging on for days and destabilizing the wider region. According to initial government statements, the mutiny began in the early hours of Sunday, December 7, 2025, when a small group of soldiers attempted to undermine the state and its institutions. Military leadership, however, remained firm. The Beninese armed forces, loyal to their oath, maintained their commitment to the Republic and prepared to neutralize the threat before it could spread. This was the moment Benin activated its emergency protocol, and when ECOWAS responded with a level of speed unprecedented in the region. The rapid reaction immediately raised a crucial question. What did ECOWAS see in this attempted coup that compelled it to mobilize troops and authorize foreign fighter jets within mere hours? According to regional officials, the bloc's response was driven by the understanding that this was not simply a domestic power grab. It was a direct threat to West Africa's fragile political equilibrium. Benin is not a remote Sahelian state. It is a vital coastal corridor, an economic artery, and a stabilizing buffer between countries already destabilized by recent coups. A collapse in Cotonou would have pushed the geopolitical balance of West Africa even deeper into uncertainty. ECOWAS leaders recognized the danger almost instantly. 4 key member states, Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, Sierra Leone, and, most critically, Nigeria, received early briefings through Benin's emergency channel. What they heard was alarming. A mutinous faction had already taken control of the national broadcaster and was attempting to entrench itself inside a military camp. From experience, the bloc understood that once coup plotters fortify themselves in a base, the likelihood of reversing the takeover drops dramatically. Mali, Guinea, and Niger had followed precisely this pattern. Seize the microphone, pull back to a barracks, and wait for hesitation within the ranks to do the rest. This time, ECOWAS refused to let history repeat itself. The bloc's newly sharpened doctrine, forged through years of political breakdown, is clear. Do not let a coup breathe. Do not wait for negotiations. Strike early, strike fast. Deny the mutineers the advantage of confusion. So when Benin formally requested assistance, ECOWAS activated its standby force with a unity and decisiveness rarely seen in recent years. But the most influential player was Nigeria. Sharing a border with Benin, dependent on its ports for trade, and deeply intertwined with its security landscape, Nigeria viewed stability in Cotonou not as a diplomatic priority but as a national imperative. For Nigeria, a coup in Cotonou is not a distant geopolitical event. It is a direct and immediate threat. That is why, when Benin issued a second urgent request for assistance, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu made a decision without precedent in ECOWAS history. He authorized fighter jets to enter a fellow member state to suppress an unfolding coup. This was not diplomatic signaling. It was outright air dominance. Nigerian aircraft crossed into Beninese airspace, located the mutineers' regrouping point inside a military camp, and disabled their capacity to resist loyalist forces. The strike was precise, strategic, and unmistakably political. A clear message that ECOWAS now treats coups with the same urgency and force normally reserved for insurgencies. For the mutineers, this was the moment the reality of their situation became undeniable. What they had hoped would evolve into a multi-day standoff collapsed instantly. Their fallback position became a target. Their communications were disrupted. Their expectation of sympathetic units rising in support evaporated under the pressure of foreign jets overhead. But ECOWAS's extraordinary speed raised a deeper question. Why were soldiers in one of West Africa's most stable democracies desperate enough to attempt a coup in the first place? Months of tension within Benin's military had gone largely unacknowledged by political leaders. In the northern barracks, frustration was no longer whispered. It simmered. Soldiers were exhausted from long deployments, increasingly frequent insurgent attacks, inadequate equipment, and a growing perception that they were being sent into danger without meaningful support. Benin, once distant from the Sahel's conflicts, had quietly become a frontline state. Ambushes, casualties, and unmarked graves accumulated far from the capital's political spotlight. While the government maintained an image of stability, units near the Burkina Faso border lived a very different reality. One that resembled the early stages of the crises that consumed Ouagadougou and Niamey. Many in uniform felt their sacrifices were being minimized ahead of the April elections. When the mutineers appeared on national television, their statement was crafted to tap directly into these internal frustrations. Their language, references to fallen comrades, neglect, and concealed battlefield losses, echoed conversations that had circulated in barracks for months. To civilians, the message seemed vague. To soldiers, it was an unmistakable signal. Still, frustration alone does not ignite a coup. Timing does. President Patrice Talon was approaching the end of his final term. His party had endorsed former finance minister Romuald Wadagni as its preferred successor. Meanwhile, the opposition's strongest candidate, Renaud Abo, had been disqualified for failing to secure the required sponsors, a decision widely viewed as engineered to protect continuity rather than competition. Inside the military, officers who already felt marginalized saw the coming transition as a political door closing, and believed that if they did not act now, they might never have another chance. The mutineers believed they had chosen the perfect moment to strike. A population distracted by an election cycle, a military frustrated by months of tension, and a government preoccupied with succession politics. In their view, the coup was not merely a bid for power but a corrective measure, a way to steer the nation before a new administration inherited an unresolved security crisis. But their calculations were deeply flawed. They overestimated the depth of military anger. Frustration existed, certainly. Soldiers wanted better conditions, more equipment, and greater recognition. Yet wanting reform is not the same as wanting a government toppled. When the mutineers declared themselves in charge, they expected their announcement to ignite momentum. Instead, the response was silence. No units joined, no commanders defected, no political figures stepped forward to legitimize the takeover. And when Nigerian fighter jets entered Beninese airspace, the final illusion evaporated. No soldier was willing to risk being branded a traitor under the watch of regional intervention forces. Still, the mutiny exposed an uncomfortable truth. Benin's stability had been more fragile than it appeared. Beneath the surface lay an unheard military, a political environment shaped by distrust, and a nation edging closer to the Sahel's volatility than most officials were willing to acknowledge. This leads to a critical question. If frustration was real but support was absent, why did the coup collapse almost instantly once the government launched its counter-offensive? The answer is simple. The mutineers controlled nothing beyond the television studio. Their announcement looked dramatic on screen, but in reality, their operation lacked every element required to sustain a coup. They had no territorial foothold, no senior officers backing them, no armored units, no political allies, and no fallback strategy capable of withstanding a rapid response. Their coup existed more in symbolism than in actual power. When loyalist units advanced toward the broadcaster, the mutineers expected hesitation, the same hesitation that had allowed coups to succeed in Mali, Niger, and Guinea. But this time, hesitation never came. Senior commanders reaffirmed loyalty within minutes, and troops received clear, immediate directives: contain, isolate, advance. The mutineers quickly realized they were not inspiring a wider rebellion. They stood isolated inside a building already surrounded by loyal forces. Their retreat to a military camp, meant to be a strategic fallback, instead exposed them, turning the situation from a chaotic broadcast into a clear military target. With their location known, the government no longer needed negotiations or intelligence. It simply closed in. Nigeria's intervention sealed their fate. The arrival of fighter jets sent an unmistakable message. The mutineers were no longer facing just Benin. They were facing the entire region. Any soldier considering joining the revolt abandoned the idea instantly. The plotters also misread the public mood. Unlike other West African coups that draw cheering crowds, Beninese civilians offered no support. The streets stayed quiet. People wanted stability, not turmoil. Inside the military, frustration existed, but loyalty held. No officers defected, no units joined. Once it became clear reinforcements would never come, the mutiny collapsed. Some soldiers fled, others surrendered, and their proclaimed leader, Lankola Pascal Tigri, disappeared entirely. The self-declared military committee for refoundation disintegrated as quickly as it appeared. The coup failed not because of a long fight, but because of a fundamental miscalculation, mistaking frustration for rebellion and silence for support. Yet its failure leaves behind a larger warning. West Africa's future will no longer be shaped quietly. It will be defined in fast-moving confrontations where coups erupt at dawn and regional alliances respond within hours. The Benin mutiny proved something ECOWAS had not demonstrated in years: a willingness to take swift, decisive action. And that shift may redefine the next chapter of West African politics, after a decade in which military takeovers rippled across Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger. ECOWAS answered with sanctions, communiques, and diplomacy, but rarely with a single decisive strike. Over time, mutineers across the region learned an uncomfortable truth. Toppling a government was chaotic, risky, but ultimately doable. If they captured the capital and held it long enough, the world would eventually adjust around them. Benin shattered that assumption overnight. Nigeria's airstrikes signaled a new doctrine. A coup attempt would no longer mean facing only your own government. It meant facing the region's full military force. This was not symbolic pressure. It was a fundamental shift. It meant coup plotters could no longer hide behind hesitation, fragmented diplomacy, or slow international reaction. The era of wait and see was finished. But a doctrine built on speed also comes with its dangers. First, rapid intervention risks escalating minor mutinies into major conflicts. The moment foreign aircraft cross a border, the crisis stops being internal. It becomes regional, even geopolitical. Neighboring states may feel compelled to take sides or view intervention as overreach. In a region already fractured by rival alliances and deep mistrust, one miscalculation could spread conflict faster than it resolves it. Second, failed coups do not erase the grievances that caused them. Benin's mutiny revealed real fractures inside its security forces. Those fractures don't disappear because a TV station is retaken or an airport is secured. If soldiers feel unheard, if northern communities feel abandoned, if elections feel predetermined, then the fuel for unrest remains in place. Third, airstrikes set a powerful and dangerous precedent. Will ECOWAS respond this aggressively every time? What if the next attempt has broader military support, civilian backing, or political sponsorship? What if it lasts longer? What if an airstrike misses its target? Or if a jet is shot down? These possibilities can flip a local mutiny into a regional emergency within hours. And then there is the symbolic cost. Once a stable nation like Benin experiences an attempted coup, the illusion of immunity is gone. No country in West Africa can confidently say it won't happen here. It can happen. It did happen. And next time, it may not fail. West Africa now stands at a decisive crossroads. The slow, quiet era of coups followed by polite diplomacy is ending. A new phase has begun, fast, forceful, risky, and unpredictable, which leaves one question echoing across the region's capitals. If ECOWAS has chosen to fight coups with force, what happens when the next coup decides to fight back? Let us know in the comments. Can Africa truly confront every coup? If you want more videos that uncover the untold stories of Black civilization, culture, history, and the global legacy of African power, subscribe and hit the bell icon. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.